Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 2. Today we are going to continue our march towards World War II by discussing a couple of things. We're going to talk about the rise of Nazi Germany, and we're also going to talk about the growing anti-Semitism within Nazi Germany. So take down these important terms that I've got here on this slide, as well as the questions below. You should be able to identify the terms as well as answer the questions by the time you get to the last slide. So, let's get to it. By 1932, the Nazis are the largest party in the German parliament. And ultimately, that power cannot be ignored. On January 30th, 1933, Hitler was named Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. The position of Chancellor means that Hitler is now the head of government. But that doesn't mean Hitler is the most powerful man in Germany by 1933. Germany is still a liberal democracy in 1933, and while he is Chancellor, he is still not as powerful as the President, Paul von Hindenburg. Von Hindenburg is a hero of World War I, and he truly has the loyalty and devotion of the German people. Nor do the Nazis completely control Parliament. They are one of the largest parties in Parliament, but they don't have a majority. Therefore, a lot of Hitler's critics in 1933 are going to look at him and believe he's really not going to last in office. Many believe he will fail miserably and ultimately be replaced. One of those who underestimates Hitler is a man named Fritz von Papen, one of Hitler's political opponents. As he said, quote, "Within 2 months we will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak." But Hitler, of course, as we know, will prove to be far more wily than his enemies will suspect. One thing that will aid in Hitler's continued rise to power is going to be an emergency or a crisis that's going to hit on February 27, 1933. On that date, the Reichstag, the German parliament building, will be nearly destroyed by a fire. Hitler and the Nazis immediately claimed that this was an act of terrorism committed by communists against Germany. In other words, the government of Germany was under threat of revolution. Someone needed to act. That someone was Hitler. The Nazis will use this crisis to build up support among the population. They will claim that they're the only ones who can stand up against this outside threat that communism represents. The voters are going to buy it. The Nazis will ultimately win a majority of votes in the elections in 1933. Now that the Nazis have a majority in Parliament, they will push through a law called the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act was meant to be merely a temporary measure, simply intended to deal with the economic crisis as well as the crisis over the fire. The Enabling Act will ultimately give Hitler dictatorial powers for 4 years. Again, as I said, it's meant to be merely temporary. And it's merely meant to give Hitler these powers to deal with the immediate crisis. As we know today, he'll never give up that power. Immediately, Hitler will use the powers granted to him under the Enabling Act to move against his political opponents. The Nazis will push through a law outlawing all other political parties. You had to be a Nazi in Germany, or else you were out of luck. They also will end freedom of speech, assembly, and press. In other words, free expression, one of the hallmarks of the Enlightenment, is now dead in Germany. In 1934, the Nazis will get a break, when President von Hindenburg will die. This eliminates the last line that might have prevented Hitler's rise. Only Hindenburg had the love and the respect of the people to pose a threat. Now he's dead. There is nothing standing in the Nazis' way. Hitler will quickly begin to move to consolidate his power and to build up the German fascist state. The first thing he'll do is bring universities under Nazi control. In other words, what he'll do is he'll make declarations about what can and cannot be taught in Germany's universities. He will continue his move against free expression by banning all liberal, socialist, and Jewish literature. And he will create the Hitler Youth, a sort of Boy Scouts for young Nazis. The Hitler Youth spread Nazi poison through the children of the nation. Boys were taught to be strong and to love the German nation. Girls were taught to stay home and become good wives and mothers to German men. Let's take a few moments to figure out exactly where we are. In class, we discussed a definition of fascism, and I want to see where Hitler's Germany measures up against that definition. First of all, that definition talked about the use of extreme nationalism. And Hitler certainly has been using nationalism to build up his support. The Treaty of Versailles, or should I say, hatred of the Treaty of Versailles, is one of the hallmarks of Hitler's program. He has used that. He has used anger against this treaty among the German people to build up his power. Our definition also talked about centralized authority. The Enabling Act certainly gave Hitler the centralized authority of a fascist dictator. As I said, it was only meant to be a temporary measure, meant to last only throughout the emergency. But Hitler, once given that power, is not going to give it up. Power has now been concentrated or consolidated into the hands of one man, Adolf Hitler. What about opposition ideas and opposition parties? Hitler has also used the Enabling Act to destroy all opposition. As we said, all political parties were quickly outlawed after Hitler was given the dictatorial powers that he requested. So, here's another hallmark of fascism that Hitler has achieved. The final piece to the fascist puzzle is racism or anti-Semitism. Here, at least, we haven't seen that yet. We certainly know from previous classes that Hitler does harbor anti-Semitic ideas. He simply hasn't put them into practice yet. Let's see where this is going to go. Before we get too far into this, let's understand the roots of anti-Semitism. As we said in class, anti-Semitism simply means hatred of the Jews. Now, within Nazi Germany, anti-Semitism is going to be mixed with social Darwinism. Now, we first encountered social Darwinism when we discussed imperialism. Certain Europeans believed that they represented a superior race to people of color in Africa and in Asia. That led them to justify seizing their territories as colonies. In Germany, social Darwinism will also get, as I said, tied up with anti-Semitism. It's going to become popular among some groups to argue that Jews were not simply a religious group, but a separate and inferior race. For example, here is what Hitler had to say about the Jews in his book Mein Kampf. Quote, "The personification of the devil as the symbol of all evil assumes the living shape of a Jew." End quote. That's pretty clear what Hitler thinks about Jews. They are the personification of the devil. They are the symbol of all evil. Now, once Hitler comes to power, and once he is granted dictatorial powers, he's not going to waste much time in making it clear that Jews were second-class German citizens. In 1935, for example, he will declare the Nuremberg Laws. The Nuremberg Laws will essentially make Jews second-class citizens in Germany. Here's what some of them said. The Nuremberg Laws, for example, forbade Jews from marrying non-Jewish Germans. They forbade Jews from having relationships with non-Jewish Germans. They excluded Jews from German citizenship. Now the goal here was to separate Jews from, quote, pure-blooded, end quote, Germans. Essentially, they wanted to segregate Jews so that the pure German people, the non-Jewish German people, wouldn't have to associate or deal with Jews because it was thought that even the slightest association was contaminating the German people, contaminating German purity. Now, in addition to making Jews second-class citizens, these laws are going to have another impact within Germany. These laws will unleash a violent form of anti-Semitism across Germany. Just being Jewish could get you beaten up, or worse. The most extreme form of anti-Semitic violence before the outbreak of World War II will occur in November of 1938. The event was known as Kristallnacht, or, quote, Night of the Broken Glass, end quote. This is due to all of the broken windows in Jewish homes, businesses, and houses of worship. But Kristallnacht does not stop with broken windows. Many synagogues across Germany were burned. Thousands of Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized, and more than 100 Jews were killed. Thousands more were attacked and beaten. This photograph depicts one synagogue in Germany that was destroyed on Kristallnacht. You can see the utter devastation, the utter destruction to this once grand and beautiful building. But sadly, Kristallnacht does not mark the peak of anti-Semitism in Germany. Instead, things will simply continue to get worse. After November 1938, German Jews will be banned from public buildings. They will be banned, or forbidden, I should say, from owning or working in a retail store. This is because Hitler's idea is he, again, wants to ensure that non-Jewish Germans don't have to associate or deal with Jewish individuals. And again, it's still going to get worse. After Kristallnacht, 30,000 Jews will be sent to concentration camps across Germany. These concentration camps are not new to Germany. They had been established in 1933, shortly after Hitler had taken power as Chancellor. But before Kristallnacht, the main occupants, or the prisoners in these camps, had typically been political enemies and political opponents, people who had belonged to parties other than the Nazi Party. After Kristallnacht, this is going to change. Jews will become the main inhabitants of these camps. But while Jews may have formed the majority of the prisoners in these camps, they were not the only groups to be imprisoned there. The mentally handicapped will be sent to these camps. Many of them will be forcibly sterilized to prevent them from breeding and creating more peoples that the Nazis considered to be inferior. The Roma, or as many of us know them, gypsies, will also be sent to the camps. Just like Jews, the Roma are considered to be an inferior people, and so therefore they are to be separated away from the pure-blooded German folk so that they don't contaminate the German bloodline. Another group targeted by the Nazis will be homosexuals. Homosexuals under Nazi rule will be considered perverts, and so therefore they were to be separated again from the rest of German society and sent off to the concentration camps. So once again, let's recap this. Where are we? How does Hitler's fascism measure up to our definition of fascism from class? Does he have extreme nationalism, or does he use extreme nationalism? Absolutely. Has he centralized power into his hands? Yes, he has. The Enabling Act made that possible. Has he destroyed all opposition parties and political opponents? Yes, he has outlawed all opposition parties, and he sends political opponents to concentration camps. And the final piece in our fascist puzzle is racism and anti-Semitism. And certainly, by 1938, it's clear that Hitler is targeting Jews, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse.